Hey friends, it's Mike. It's Saturday, August 8th, 2020, and this is a channel update for my Paul is Dead channel. The feedback from Steve's presentation on where Bio Paul might be buried has been excellent. Sometime in the future, I will have Steve back on the show to present any additional findings and clues. Back when I was putting my big presentation together, did the Beatles write all their own music? I started an analysis that I ended up tabling so I could release the documentary without further delays. The analysis gets into how many original songs did the Beatles actually have to learn to play for their concerts. A lot of people don't realize that the Beatles typically played 30-minute sets with a set list of around 10 to 12 songs, with 11 being fairly common. Of the 10 to 12 songs, 2 were usually cover tunes and the rest were original compositions. So between 1963 and 1966, on their first 7 UK albums, Please Please Me Through Revolver, the official narrative tells us Lennon and McCartney wrote 77 songs, along with approximately 10 additional songs which were not on albums and released separately as singles. This would include songs like Day Tripper, I Feel Fine, I Want to Hold Your Hand, Paperback Writer, etc. This brings the total number of original songs from the 1963 through 1966 period to around 90. The question I was asking myself was how many songs did the Beatles have to learn to play for their tours? My initial findings, and again the analysis is not finished, is around 20 to 25 songs out of the 90. As I was going through the analysis, one interesting point I noted is they played none of the songs from the Revolver album during their last concert at Candlestick Park on August 29, 1966, which was after Revolver was released on August 5th. During that show, they played 11 songs, 2 of which were covers, Long Tall Sally and Rock and Roll Music, and the rest of the songs came from previous albums or singles, but not one song from the Revolver album. I found that to be odd since they were fresh out of the studio recording those songs and there should have been an effort to promote their newly released record. To me, that indicates that the Beatles did not write the songs on Revolver either, and the reason they did not play any of the Revolver tracks at Candlestick was because they didn't have time to learn the songs. Logic would tell us that if they had written the songs, then they would have played at least 1 or 2 of the tracks during the concert. So I don't have a time frame yet on when I will complete the analysis. I figure it will be a 30 to 45 minute presentation when I'm done. I did finish the new updated edition of Billy's Back, and for the footnotes alone, it was worth the $14.99. The updated footnotes, several of which are not in the blue-covered edition of Memoirs, confirmed my theory that the Beatles, between 1962 through 1966, did not write most, if any, of the songs credited to Lennon, McCartney, and Harrison during that period. And the footnotes support my premise that starting with Sgt. Pepper, we begin to hear more of their own material, but there were still others outside the band who were contributing songs between the 1967 through 1970 period. One footnote stated that the song Imagine was generously credited to John Lennon, meaning that Lennon did not write that song, and I have to admit, that admission surprised me. I will do a presentation to cover the new material in Billy's Back, but that's probably 3 to 4 months out. In the meantime, if you're interested, you might want to pick up the book and read it for yourself. And now I thought I would take a moment and go through some Q&A, some frequently asked questions. I receive a lot of emails, PMs, and comments on the Beatles, and I wanted to answer some of those inquiries. Okay, so question number 1. Do you still enjoy Beatle music? The answer is I do, but the luster around the Beatles and believing they were musical geniuses is completely gone. What I can appreciate is the craftsmanship behind the songs, regardless of who wrote them and who actually played on the recordings. It's the same thing as enjoying many of the songs from the Monkees. I like a lot of the songs the Monkees sang. We know they didn't play on their records, with the exception of their album Headquarters, or so we're told, but many of their songs are quite good. I think the song Last Train to Clarksville is one of the best pop songs coming out of the 1960s. Question number 2. Are you going to look into John Lennon or the possible replacement of any of the other Beatles? I have no plans to look into the other Beatles, but for the record, I suspect that starting around 1967, a second John emerges and becomes a primary player in the role. My suspicion is based on differences in facial features, specifically with the nose and earlobes. Biological John did not have the very pronounced pinching or narrowing of the nose that we often see later on, and Bio John's earlobes were attached and protruded out when he was facing forward. This is another facial feature that is not consistent when I studied images of Lennon across the timeline. The version of Lennon with the very narrow or pinched nose did have attached earlobes, but the lobes appear very different to me. They didn't flare out. Another anomaly is the mole above Lennon's eyebrows, which comes and goes. So I'm not sure Biological John was completely replaced, since I did find later images that align with his nose and ear structure. But taking this beyond what I just explained is not on my radar, so I won't be dedicating time to studying Lennon or any of the other artists I've been asked about, such as Bob Dylan, Jim Morrison, Jimi Hendrix, etc. I'll leave that to another intrepid soul. Question number 3. Do you believe all 4 Beatles died back in 1966? No, I do not believe all 4 Beatles died back in '66. My position is only Paul McCartney passed away, and based on my answer in question number 2, I think it's possible that Biological John was either swapped out or shared the Lennon role with another actor. I believe George and Ringo, setting aside the use of doubles, were always George and Ringo. Differences in appearances can be explained with the use of doubles and image doctoring, and this can easily throw people off. So my position is the only Beatle that died and was permanently replaced was Paul, and John Lennon perhaps semi-replaced with a prominent double who may have also been a musician. As I've mentioned in a previous show, a source contacted me and explained that right from the beginning there were 3 doubles for each Beatle. So that means from day one there were 4 Pauls, 4 Johns, 4 Georges, and 4 Ringos. And this is why it is very difficult to discern who we are really looking at across the timeline. Are we looking at the biological version of that Beatle or a double? And then add into the mix all of the image doctoring that has taken place over time, and we have ourselves quite a challenge. And I should also add that I do not subscribe to the twin theory. Billy is not biological Paul's twin. Question number 4. Are you and Tom Harriet the same person? This question is a funny one. If anyone took a moment to compare me with Tom, you would see we look nothing alike, and thus we are not the same person. Another question related to this is when people ask me if Tom is real. I can assure you he is. Tom has authored a number of books, and he is easy to find on Facebook and Twitter, and he recently did a non-Beatles related interview on YouTube. Question number 5. What is your opinion on other Paul is Dead researchers? As a rule of thumb, I do not publicly comment on other researchers. I think it's unprofessional. My approach is to stay focused on my own work, and people can decide for themselves whose research resonates best with them. Question number 6. Do you believe there is any possibility the Beatles were once an organic band? No, the Beatles were never organic. They were a Tavistock creation from the very beginning. I know a lot of people don't want to hear that, including many Paul is Dead researchers and ideologues. But it's important to remember the narrative of the 4 happy-go-lucky lads from Liverpool who were discovered by a small record store owner, who were then signed by EMI, and then declared musical geniuses and achieved worldwide superstardom by 1964, a mere 2 years after meeting George Martin, comes from the official story we are given by the media, which is controlled by Tavistock. The official Beatles narrative is fictional. It's myth. In this reality, anything worth knowing is a lie, and you should start with that premise when researching any conspiracy. Question number 7. Are you connected into Billy or Tom or memoirs in any way? No, I am not. I have covered this question many times in my shows and presentations. I have never had any dealings with Billy. Tom and I have communicated periodically over the last 4 years when I reached out to him to help clarify certain passages within the book. That is the extent of my interaction with Tom. I have never met him in person, and I have no connection into the book other than to have used memoirs as a starting point for my own research into McCartney and the Beatles. The work I have presented over time goes beyond what is revealed in the book. A prime example is my analysis on whether the Beatles wrote all their own music. The narrative in memoirs sticks to the storyline that Lennon and McCartney wrote their own songs, especially at the first layer of the book's narrative. When I presented the evidence about the Beatles not writing all their own music, Tom apparently leveraged that revelation when he updated Billy's back to tell us that the lads, from 1962 through 1966, wrote very little to none of the songs credited to them during that period, and starting with Sgt. Pepper, more of their own material begins to emerge. It was my research that allowed more disclosure to come forth. So this is a case where memoirs built upon my narrative. Also, the work I've done to reveal the degree of occultism around the Beatles is another example of where the research went beyond what is discussed in the book. And Steve Farber's research into where Bio Paul might be buried is also not in memoirs. Question number 8. Will you continue to research the Beatles? As far as major presentations go, I don't foresee that level of research continuing. However, I will continue to present information that I feel is pertinent and interesting to my audience, but I'm not looking to make a career out of researching the Beatles. To be honest, the work effort behind my big presentation, Did the Beatles Write All Their Own Music?, was very involved, and I view that as a once-in-a-lifetime endeavor. So as of right now, I'm not expecting to take on anything of that magnitude again. Question number 9. When do you think Billy will fully disclose? As I've mentioned a number of times, full disclosure from a mainstream perspective won't happen until after he dies, and how soon after his death is anyone's guess. It will probably be a number of years later. We can see that the controllers are ensuring he goes out in the spotlight. This is being done by pushing his albums, interviews, news articles, etc. In fact, there's an interview he just did with GQ magazine called At Home with Paul McCartney, his most candid interview yet. I will put the link in the description box below. As I predicted in a number of shows, the Pyramid of Power is going to reward Billy for all the work he has done on their behalf. This is not me endorsing Billy, and I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm just saying it is what it is. And finally, question number 10. Who do you favor, Billy or biological Paul? I favor neither of them. To me, they are both actors on the world stage who played a part in the massive psychological operation known as the Beatles. The research had a dissociative effect on me where I moved into a neutral corner, which has allowed me, in my opinion, to come at the research in a more objective way since I do not embrace any of the players. What became important to me was the how and why of the PSYOP and the components behind the creation of it. That's all for this update, folks. Before we head out, I will leave you with a wink and a nod from Billy. The comment section is open. Take care and have a great day.
One final question. In all the time you've been Beatles, before you were just people from Liverpool,